Chapter 11, The Reign of Rasputin, 1915 to 1916. Leapfrogging Ministers. In Petrograd, Rasputin had a new apartment, located on the third floor of an ordinary brick building in a working-class neighborhood. It was not an elegant place, but it was very close to the train that ran between the city at Tsarskoye Selo, making trips to the palace easy. Living in a modest apartment also helped Rasputin preserve his image as a holy man whose interests were heavenly rather than earthly. This, of course, was far from the truth. Every day a long line of people from every walk of life snaked down his apartment stairs: shopkeepers, countesses, college professors, peasants. Knowing Rasputin's influence with the empress, they came seeking favors. One to have her husband transferred from the front, another to obtain a job promotion, still another to be given a lucrative government contract. One musically untrained woman even wanted Rasputin to have her made the lead singer at the imperial opera. If he chose to help, Rasputin would scrawl a note in his almost illegible handwriting to high-ranking officials within the government. "My dear and valued friend," it would read, "do this for me, Gregory." Many of these notes appeared at the palace. All were drawn up in the same way, recalled one court official, and they opened all doors in Petrograd. In return for granting these requests, the Starets accepted money, wine, food, whatever the favor seeker had to offer. Another group of people also hung around Rasputin's apartment, a unit of policemen placed there by Nicholas to protect the Starets. They took detailed notes of all his comings and goings, and their notes did not paint a holy picture. "Rasputin took part in a drinking party with some college students," said one. "A musician struck up and there was singing, and Rasputin danced with a maidservant." Read another, "Rasputin came home dead drunk at 1 a.m. and insulted the concierge's wife." And another, "Rasputin came home at 7 a.m. He was dead drunk. He smashed a pane of glass in the house door. Apparently he had one fall already, for his nose was swollen." These reports, thousands of pages taken over the course of a year, were given to Alexandra, but she refused to see the truth. The reason people hated him, she claimed, was because they hated her. Furiously, she threw the pages into the trash. The contents of these reports, however, leaked to the public. Soon, the staircase notes were being whispered about by court officials, countesses, factory workers, even soldiers. And almost everyone was outraged. Not only was the citizenry convinced that Rasputin was a fake, but they saw the empress as a narrow-minded, reactionary, hysterical woman because she remained under the fraud's spell. Such gossip could only further degrade the monarchy, making them appear less near to God than ever before. For the good of the country, many now believed the Starets' power had to end. But no matter how much gossip swirled, the telephone in Rasputin's apartment kept ringing as, time and again, Alexander summoned him to Tsarskoye Selo, where they met at Anna Vrubova's house on the estate to avoid the gossipers. Rasputin would rush to her side, somehow managing to sober up before arriving. Once there, he ingeniously acted the role of a holy man. So convincing was his performance that Alexandra firmly believed Rasputin was God's messenger, sent to guide them through the war. "I fully trust in our friend's wisdom, endowed by God, to counsel what is right for you and our country," she wrote Nicholas soon after he departed for Stavka. "He sees far ahead, and therefore his judgment can be relied on." It would be fatal, she insisted, not to listen to his advice. And Rasputin had lots of advice, especially about Nicholas's ministers. The Starets felt threatened by these powerful men, most of whom hated him. He wanted them out of his way, but not so he could rule Russia. Rasputin never wanted that. He merely wanted to be left alone to continue his depraved lifestyle, and so he'd done with Nikolasha. He began talking against the ministers. Alexandra was an avid listener. Since her earliest days as empress, she had divided her world into a large group of enemies and a much smaller group of friends. And over the years, she'd grown increasingly paranoid. In her mind, the war was really a struggle between the few good and moral people who supported Nicholas against the ever-growing circle of people who opposed him. Rasputin easily convinced her that the ministers were scheming against her husband, herself, and the Starets. Within weeks of Nicholas's departure, Alexandra began bombarding him with letters, sometimes several a day, filled with her paranoid suspicions about so-called rotten ministers. Forgive me, but I don't like the choice of Minister of War. Is he not an enemy of our friend? She would write. Or, long-nosed Sazonov, the foreign minister, is such a pancake. Or why do we have a useless rag as a minister of court? Once the seeds of doubt had been sown, she suggested replacements. Our friend finds Ivanov would be good as a minister of war. Really, my treasure, I think he is the man our friend hinted about. I am always careful in my choice. Our friend begs very much that you should not name Makarov as Minister of the Interior. You remember how he never stood up for me. It would indeed be a mistake to name him. Rasputin chose all the replacements. Unfortunately, he did not care about these men's ability or knowledge. Instead, he picked them, wrote one historian, because they liked him, or said they liked him, or at least didn't bother him. One time, the Staryets discovered a candidate in a Petrograd nightclub. Drunk, yet again, Rasputin loudly declared the band's bass singer too weak. Glancing around the club, he spied a plump aristocrat named A.N. Kvostov. Slapping his back, Rasputin said, "Brother, go and help them sing. You are fat and can make a lot of noise." The equally drunk Kvostov agreed. Staggering on stage, he burst into song. Rasputin clapped with delight. Not long afterward, Kvostov was unexpectedly appointed to the post of Minister of the Interior. And so it went, a crazy game of ministerial leapfrog, as ministers were appointed and fired by Nicholas at the behest of the empress and her Staryets. Between September 1915 and March 1917, 4 different men held the position of prime minister. In that same time, Russia had 5 ministers of the interior, 4 ministers of agriculture, and 3 ministers of war, transport, and foreign affairs. At one point, unable to find a man fawning enough to suit Rasputin, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs went without a leader for 4 months. Alexandra solved the problem by having Nicholas turn over the foreign minister's responsibilities to the prime minister. But the prime minister was already doing the job of the minister of the interior, also a vacant position. Overworked, the prime minister handed over the interior's work to the minister of justice, who in turn handed the justice work over to the minister of agriculture. This complicated leapfrogging deprived Russia of its most able statesmen at a time when they were most needed. Instead, a group of incompetent, mediocre men now held the most important positions in government. It did not take long for the people, upper and lower classes alike, to lose all confidence in the ministers and, by extension, the Tsar's government. "It is a terrible thing," one Duma member remarked glumly. "The Tsar offends the nation by what he allows to go on in the palace, while the country offends the Tsar by its terrible suspicions. The result is the destruction of those centuries-old ties which have sustained Russia, and the cause of all this, the weakness of one man and one woman. Oh, how terrible an autocracy without an autocrat." The point of no return. By late 1916, Russia was reaching to the point of no return. Hundreds of thousands of men continued to die in a war that now seemed pointless to many. Away from the fighting, the country was falling into an economic chaos, and the Tsar's government was crumbling. The Russian people blamed much of it on the empress and her Staryets. Obscene pamphlets about them began circulating around Petrograd. Cartoons showed Rasputin as a puppet master who had the imperial couple on a string. By fall 1916, anger against Rasputin reached the boiling point. People everywhere believed he was the actual ruler of Russia. Despite censorship laws forbidding criticism of either the Tsar or his government, the newspaper, the Siberian Trade Gazette, boldly called Rasputin a thief and a half-educated peasant. Across Russia, citizens began calling the government the reign of Rasputin. In the Duma, too, members publicly raged about the Staryets. "Dark forces are destroying the Romanov dynasty," shouted Deputy Vladimir Purishkevich during a legislative session in December 1916. Purishkevich, who had never before breathed a word of criticism against the Tsar, now pounded furiously on his desk. "If you are truly loyal to Russia, then on your feet. Have the courage to tell the Tsar, an obscure Staryets shall govern Russia no longer." The hall erupted into wild cheering. Only one man did not leap to his feet. Prince Felix Yusupov, the dashing and rich husband of Nicholas's favorite niece, Irina. Instead, he paled and trembled as he realized what needed to be done. There was only one sure way to break the empress's dependence on the Staryets: kill him. But Yusupov couldn't do it alone, so he begged Purishkevich, as well as the Tsar's cousin Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, to help. He also asked an army physician, Dr. Stanislaw Lazarevert, and an army officer named Sergei Sukhotin to join them. "We will be heroes," he told the men. "The empress will land in an asylum within 2 weeks of Rasputin's death, and if the emperor is freed of the influence of Rasputin and his wife, everything will change. He will be a good monarch, and we will have saved the empire." Inspired by Yusupov's words, the men threw themselves into murder plans. For the next 4 weeks they plotted. By December 29th, all was ready. Death to the Staryets. It was just before midnight and snowing heavily when Rasputin arrived at Prince Yusupov's palace. The Staryets had been lured there by the promise of finally meeting the prince's wife, Irina, reportedly the most beautiful woman in Petrograd. He came dressed in his best, a silk blouse embroidered with cornflowers and tied with a red cord, black velvet pants, and brand-new boots. At first, everything went according to plan. Yusupov showed Rasputin into a basement room where he plied the Staryets with wine and cakes that Dr. Lazarevert claimed to have laced with cyanide. He waited for his guest to fall to the floor, writhing in pain, but to his amazement, the poison had no effect at all. At this point, according to Yusupov, Rasputin pointed to a guitar in the corner. "Play something cheerful," he said. "I like your singing." As Yusupov strummed, Rasputin helped himself to another glass of poisoned wine. 2 hours later, the still guitar-playing prince finally lost patience. Excusing himself, he hurried to the top of the stairs where his fellow murderer sat listening. What should he do? Yusupov later claimed that Grand Duke Dmitry wanted to give up, but Purishkevich objected. He didn't think it was wise to send Rasputin home half-poisoned. Said Yusupov, "Then you shouldn't have any objections if I just shot him, would you?" Grabbing Dmitry's pistol, he returned to the basement. The Staryets was gulping still more poisoned cakes when Yusupov shot him in the back. With a wild scream, Rasputin fell to the floor. He looked, Yusupov later recalled, like a broken marionette. The others rushed into the room. They found the prince standing over the body, wearing, recalled Purishkevich, an expression of loathing. Feeling for Rasputin's pulse, Dr. Lazarevert declared the man dead. Yusupov handed the gun back to Dmitry. Then, while the others went in search of something to wrap the body in, he collapsed with relief into a chair beside the corpse. That's when I saw both eyes, the green eyes of a viper, staring at me with an expression of diabolical hatred, claimed the prince. Rasputin wasn't dead after all. Staggering to his feet, his mouth foaming, the Staryets lunged at his would-be murderer. His long, bony fingers dug like steel claws into the prince's shoulders. Terror-stricken, Yusupov struggled and broke free from the death grip. He pounded up the stairs. Behind him wheezed Rasputin. "Felix!" he called, using the prince's first name. "He's alive!" Yusupov screamed to the others as he reached the top of the stairs. "He's getting away!" Incredibly, the Staryets, who just minutes earlier had been dying on the cellar floor, was now running across the palace courtyard toward the gate. "I will tell everything to the empress," he shouted over his shoulder. Purishkevich could not let that happen. Pulling out his own pistol, he chased after the Staryets. "I fired," recalled Purishkevich. "The night echoed with the shot. I missed. I fired again. Again I missed. I raged at myself. Rasputin neared the gate. I fired a third time. The bullet hit him in the shoulder. He stopped. I fired a fourth time and hit him in the head." And yet Rasputin kept breathing. Yusupov came running from the palace, a rubber club in his hand. "In my frenzy, I hit anywhere," he later said. Rasputin soon stopped moving. Then the murderers rolled the body in a blue curtain, tied with ropes, and shoved it into the back seat of Purishkevich's car. Driving a few blocks to the frozen Neva River, they shoved the body through a hole in the ice. 3 days later, police divers pulled the body from the icy river. They were surprised to see that Rasputin's right arm was freed from the ropes and slightly raised. This left people with the notion that the Staryets had still been alive when his murderers dumped him in the water, that he struggled with incredible strength until he finally drowned. An autopsy performed that very day, however, refuted this notion. According to the senior autopsy surgeon, Dmitry Kosoratov, the body was riddled with bruises. This was consistent with Yusupov's story about the rubber club. Curiously, though, While the autopsy did reveal cakes and wine in Rasputin's stomach, no traces of the cyanide Dr. Lazarvert had supposedly put in them was found. Had Lazarvert changed his mind without telling the others and not poisoned the food? Was this why Rasputin continued to eat and drink that night with no ill effects? Dr. Kosoratov also noted 3 gunshot wounds. The first bullet had entered Rasputin's chest, slicing through the Staryet's stomach and liver. The second had gone through his back, piercing his kidney, and the third had struck the back of the head. Either of the first 2 wounds would have killed Rasputin in minutes, the doctor determined, but the third injury would have killed him instantly. There was no way, he concluded, that Rasputin was alive when his killers dumped him in the river. This was corroborated by the fact that no water was found in his lungs. Rasputin had not died from drowning. The cause of death was a gunshot wound. The discovery of Rasputin's body touched off public celebrations across Russia. Bells rang, flags waved, people kissed each other in the street, recalled Ambassador Paleolo, and many went to burn candles of Thanksgiving in Our Lady of Kazan. Some shops even posted photographs of Yusupov and the others in their front windows. Banners beneath them boldly proclaimed the men heroes. The news. The morning after the murder, the telephone in the Alexander Palace rang. It was the Minister of the Interior calling with grave news. A patrolman standing near the entrance of the Yusupov Palace was startled by the sounds of a pistol, he reported. Ringing the doorbell, he was met by Purishkevich, who appeared to be in an advanced state of intoxication. He said they had just killed Rasputin. Struggling to stay calm, Alexandra ordered an investigation. Then she closed herself up in her lilac drawing room. "I cannot and won't believe he has been killed," she wrote to Nicholas. "God have mercy, such utter anguish." The children could not stop crying. Why would anyone want to hurt their friend? They sat on the sofa, huddled up close together, recalled one courtier. They were cold and visibly terribly upset. They evidently sensed that, with his murder, something terrible and undeserved had started for themselves, and that it was moving relentlessly toward them.